Alright, this is a continuation of my last video on the last 4 steps, which is the top layer. Now this is the last step. This is by far the hardest step. It's the least amount of moves. Well, it's the smallest algorithm, but it's the hardest. It's where most people get lost and just give up. But don't give up, because once you figure it out, you'll realize how easy it is. Alright, the 4-step algorithm you need to know is R prime, D prime, R, D. Simple, right? Wrong. It's not. It's actually rather annoying. But yeah, this is the beginner method, so baby steps. Alright. So what that means is, what you're going to be doing at this step is you're going to be rotating each corner, because right now the whole entire cube is solved except for these 4 corners. You can look around, these are all in the right place, it's just these 4 corners. What this right here does is that you're going to be flipping these one by one until the entire cube is solved. And if you mess up even like one turn, you will get lost. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start. You just pick any corner, because what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing flipping the one that's closest, and that's front and right. So this one. You can start anywhere. Sometimes you'll have it where you only need to flip 2, you only need to flip 3, or you'll need to flip 4 like this, which is the most painful one, or the most moves. So what you're going to start by doing is you're going to start doing that move. So right, prime, D prime, R, D. And then you just keep doing that. Until you have something that looks like this, where it's flipped. Now when it's flipped, you need to make sure that you need to flip the other one. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn to another piece that needs to be flipped. Only turn the top. You do not want to, this color that you start at, you do not want that to change. So you just remember, like, this is red, so I just need to keep making sure that that middle red doesn't go anywhere. Alright, so I'm going to flip this again. I'm going to keep doing this move. And you'll notice that it'll be like that before it, like when you put it back up, it'll be yellow, but you need to make sure to finish the bottom one. Like, see, I just finished with R, but you need to make sure to finish D before you turn the top one, so one flip. And like right here, what this will happen with 4, sometimes is where it'll fix itself like this, so you just need to make sure to line them up, and then you still have to do 2 more. That rarely happens, just when you have 4. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to do the same thing. You need to flip this piece, and you need to flip that piece. So put that in the closest to you on the right side. And you need to do the same thing. So right prime, D prime, R, D. Right prime, D prime, R, and it fixes it, but you need to finish it, so you need to do the D. So D. Alright. Now you need to fix this last piece. So just turn it up there, and make sure that doesn't go, that still is the same color that's facing you as when you started. Do the same thing. R prime, D prime, R, D. R prime, D prime, R, D. R prime, D prime, R, D. R prime, D prime, R. It's fixed, then you need to do D, and then you can just tell it's almost done. You just flip it where it lines up, and then you're done. That's it. I'm going to try to get where there's different situations, so let's see. Alright. Here's one where you only have 3 instead of 4 like earlier. Now on here, you just want to make sure you pick one that you're going to switch. So you're going to flip this one, and then you got to do these other 2. So you're just going to start by doing R prime, D prime, R, D. R prime, D prime, R, D. R prime, D prime, R, D, R prime, D prime, R, D. Alright. Then you need to turn it, do it again. Make sure that same color right there does not move. Alright. R prime, D prime, R, D, R prime, D prime, R, D, R prime, D prime, R, D, R prime, D prime, R. Make sure you finish it. You gotta finish it. D. Alright. Then you gotta still have one more. See, like the whole thing looks messed up, but don't worry. I mean, just be careful. Alright, do the last one. R prime, D prime, R, D, R prime, D prime, R, D, R prime, D prime, R, D, R prime, D prime, R, D. Alright, then by here you can tell that it's almost done. And you just, there you go. That's, alright, I'm going to try to get another situation. Alright, here's another one. Sorry that took so long. I use it a different way, so I don't really come back to this method, so. Alright, in this case you have it where there's diagonal. Alright, what you need to do, closest to you, remember what color this is right here. It's blue, the centerpiece, so you do not want that to change. Alright, now you do the algorithm. R prime, D prime, R, D. R prime, D prime, R, and then finish it, D. And then that's the top is fixed, right there, that piece. So you need to turn the top to fix, now you're flipping this one. So do the same. R prime, D prime, R, D. 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 And by then, you can tell that it's almost done. You solve it. There you go. Hopefully that was helpful. I'm going to be probably making another video on what these algorithms look like with two hands. So it'd probably be easier to look at them than rather just look at the words all the time while you're trying to do it, so you know what it looks like you're actually doing.